from the NewsChannel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hi, everybody. Welcome in on a Thursday night. Rhori Johnston with you here on Open Line. We appreciate you joining us, and that means we're opening up the phone lines right now. And we're going to be talking about, well, a pretty difficult, challenging subject tonight, a controversial one. And as you see, about the Tennessee bill that aims to require the burial of fetal remains following an abortion, the burial or cremation. Now, we do know that this has passed the House and the Senate, and we have also asked both sides to be here. Unfortunately, Republicans could not be here, but we do have a Democrat who opposed this measure, and that is Representative London Lamar out of Memphis. Thank you for being with us.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me today.
Again, the lines are open, 737-PLUS, that's 737-7587. We'd like to hear from you, your thoughts on this controversial issue. Representative, give me just kind of an outline of what this bill aims to do and why you oppose it.
So the particular piece of legislation is going to require women who have surgical abortions to pay for either the cremation or the burial of the fetus. And if they cannot pay for it, the abortion clinic has to pay for it. So it's requiring that the fetal remains will have to be buried or cremated in what they call efforts to bring dignity to unborn children. Now, for me, I oppose this measure. I think that it is an unnecessary financial, mental, and emotional burden on women who are already making a difficult decision. Again, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and every woman has the right to access abortion care free from additional judgment, harm, and mental and emotional burdens, and especially additional financial burdens. We already know the cost of abortions are already very expensive. So if you don't have the money, you can't even access the service anyway. But to add additional costs, such as the cost of a burial or cremation to that, for me, I felt like it was unnecessary. And what we were trying to do is take women's private decisions and use them for political footballs. You know, I also think about women who are victims of rape or incest. Victims of rape and incest oftentimes have to make the very difficult decision to access abortion care. And so if they already have been through a traumatic situation, such as being a victim of rape or incest, then they already have to make a difficult decision about having an abortion if there was a pregnancy that resulted in that. And then they have to bear the additional cost of burials and cremation. That's just unnecessary, and that's cruel. So again, I just thought it was unnecessary. It's offensive. We are using women's reproductive decisions as political, to make political statements, and that's not what we want to do. I think there are other issues we need to focus on regarding women, is making sure that those women who do want to have children are able to have the resources that they need to have happy, healthy, and judge-free pregnancies, and making sure the doctors are treating them accurately. Women who access abortion care already know what the full procedure will look like before and after, and there are already standards in place to make sure that it's done with dignity already.
All right, let's back up a little bit and talk about that word access. We know in Tennessee, the state legislature has a Republican supermajority, more conservative. Most are anti-abortion. What is it like in the state of Tennessee right now for women to even access abortion, that procedure?
So right now, absolutely. Right now, we don't have a lot of clinics around the state because it's very, very expensive. You have to have ambulatory devices in place or set up for certain things that you need to have in the clinics that you have in a hospital, which makes actually building or having a clinic very expensive because they have to have hospital level equipment and requirements put in place. Also, you have a 48-hour rule. So you have to go have a first appointment, talk to a doctor, take your vitals. You have to have an ultrasound before you have the procedure. Then you have to wait 48 hours. Then you have to come back to get the actual procedure. It's also pretty expensive. So it can cost anywhere between maybe $500 to $1,500, depending on at what period you are in your pregnancy. And most importantly, the dignity part of it. If you go to the abortion clinic, Tennessee, most than likely you're going to see protesters outside saying rude things. And so you also have to go through that process. And when you show up, there are going to be people screaming at you as well.
So here in Tennessee, obviously, as I mentioned, most of the Republican or conservative lawmakers would prefer, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is fair to say, would prefer that there would be no abortions allowed in the state of Tennessee. But obviously, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, so it is allowed. So why not say, okay, we're gonna negotiate with you, and if you want to put some of these steps in place, if it makes you feel better, as long as it's still legal and accessible, we're willing to go ahead with some of these things, even though we disagree with it.
So what the goal of what they're trying to do is, and yes, if they could take away the right to abortion clinics altogether, or the right to have one, they would, and that's their values and that's what they believe, and that's fine if that's what you believe. But Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. And I do, before I go to the next point, want to emphasize that being pro-choice or believing that women should have the right to make the decision doesn't mean that you per se believe in abortion. I tell women all the time, I would love for you to keep their kids if you're trying to seek abortion. If you can, please, motherhood is a beautiful thing, but everyone that doesn't have that capacity or can make their decision or could even bear children without putting their lives on the line. So being pro-choice doesn't mean you are anti-life. Being pro-choice is empowering women to make the best decision for their lives and their family. But what I wanted to say was, even though they can't outlaw abortion, what they can do is put parameters in place to make accessing abortion very difficult. And what I mean by that is the 48-hour rule. Instead of being able to get it done in one time, making you see the ultrasound, wait 48 hours to think about it, then come back. Or much of the equipment requirements that many of these clinics have to have, which they really don't need, are put in place to make it more expensive to be able to even access or open up an abortion clinic. And also just the support and the safety of it all. It is better for clinics to be in urban cities so that women will have protections and more access to protections, and versus if they were in a more rural area. So what they do is just make it very, very difficult to access abortion or an open abortion clinic, which doesn't really take away your access per se, because you are able to actually go, but it makes it really hard to actually have one, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. All right. We have a couple of callers in, and I'd like to get to some right off the bat, and we will start with Ann. Hi, Ann. Welcome.
Good evening. This is one of the most ludicrous things I think I've seen our governor and our legislators do in the last, I couldn't tell you how many years. The stress, the financial burden that this is going to put on a female who is already making one of the most difficult decisions she will ever make and will carry with her the rest of her life is beyond comprehension. The financial aspect alone, and having to think about buying a plot of land in a cemetery to bury a fetus, that is, I can't even begin to comprehend it. And I am a mother of 3 grown children, and I would not make the choice for an abortion, but I would want my children, all 3 daughters, to be able to make that choice for themselves, because that is their right. And I, as a female, would respect their decision. Whether it was my decision or theirs, I would have to accept it. And I have a daughter that was a victim of a violent assault. And it has taken her years to get over it. And if this law had been in place when she was sexually assaulted by the boys that she went to high school with, this would have crushed her, and she would never have gotten over it. And she still has difficulty coming back to this city, and it is because of that assault. And this law would have kept her from ever coming home.
Yep.
This is the worst thing our governor has ever done to the females of this state.
And thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it very much. Pretty personal story there. Representative, you want to comment?
Wow, that was a touching story. I mean, first and foremost, I am so sorry that your daughter had to go through that and your family has had to live that tragedy, which is symbolic of the points that I was just making earlier. Again, this law doesn't make exceptions or think about the trauma that victims of rape have to go through and already making a very difficult decision. And that was brave of Ann to share her story with us, because it's a story of many women who don't have the bravery to go forth and be open about it, but who oftentimes have to access this service because they can't bear to carry their rapist child. And no one should have to do that. And they should be able to make that decision free of judgment and free of extra financial, emotional, and mental burdens. And that is what this law places on women: additional financial, mental, and emotional burdens that they don't deserve because they have to already make a difficult decision in the first place.
With that, we're going to take our first break, everybody, and we'll be back with Representative London Lamar, and looking forward to more of your phone calls. 737+ is the number. Stay with us.